Inflation is a very serious subject, you can argue. It's the way democracies die, and democracy dies in Latin America. Inflation is a big part of it. So it's a huge danger once you've got a populist that learns it can vote itself money. If you overdo it too much, you ruin your civilization. A lot of courses, it's a big long-range danger. If you look at the Roman Republic, even after they went to an empire, with an absolute ruler, they inflated the currency steadily for hundreds of years eventually. The whole Emerald Empire has collapsed, so it's the biggest long-run's danger we have, probably apart from nuclear war, I think. The safe consumption for an investor is that over the next 100 years, the currency is going to zero. That's my working hypothesis, a very dangerous environment. What brought in Hitler was the combination of the Weimar inflation, where they utterly destroyed the savings of the middle class in Germany. Followed by the Great Depression, it was a 1-2 punch, and Hitler came in crazy demagogue with 40% of the votes. And pretty soon we had a dictator help event for World War, so the history is not pleasant, and Germany was a very advanced and civilized nation. The Germany that Hitler took over. So if you would let your nation deteriorate too much, what do you get as a Hitler? We've proved it when you print money on the scale that modern nations are printing in Japan. The United States, Europe, we're getting into new territory. In terms of size, there's never anything quiet like what we're doing now, and we do know from what's happened in other nations. If you try and print too much money, it eventually causes terrible trouble, and we are closer to terrible trouble than we've been in the past, but it may still be a long way off, I certainly hope. So when Volcker after the 70s took the prime rate to 20% and the government was paying 15% on its government bonds, that was a horrible recession that lasted a long time, caught with a lot of agonies, and I certainly hope we're not going there again. I think the conditions that allowed Volcker to do that without interference from the politicians were very unusual. And I think in 2020 hindsight, it was a good thing that he did it. I would not predict that our modern politicians will be as willing to permit a new Volcker to get that tough with the economy and bring on that kind of a recession. So I think the new troubles are likely to be different from the old troubles. You may wish you had a Volcker-style recession instead of what you're going to get. The troubles that come to us could be worse than what Volcker was dealing with and harder to fix. Think of all Latin American countries that print too much money, they get a strong man, and so forth. That's what Plato said happened in the early Greek city-state democracies. One person, one vote, a lot of legalities. And you get demagogues, and the demagogues lather of the population. Pretty soon, you don't have your democracy anymore. I don't think that was a crazy idea on Plato's part. I think that accurately described what happened in Greece way back then. And it's happened again and again in Latin America. We don't want to go there, at least I don't. We've done something pretty extreme. And we don't know how bad the troubles will be here, whether we're going to be like Japan or something a lot worse. And what makes life interesting is we don't know how it's going to work out. I think we do know we're flirting with serious trouble. I think we also know that some of our earlier fears were overblown. Japan is still existing as a civilized nation in spite of unbelievable all former standards in terms of money printing. Think of how seductive it is. You have a bunch of interest-bearing debts, and you pay them off with checking accounts, which you're no longer paying interest. Think of how seductive that is for a bunch of legislators. You get rid of the interest payments, and you use the money supply goes up. It seems like heaven, and of course, when things get that seductive, they're likely to be overused if you start to think about it, if you're going to invest in stocks for the long term. Or real estate, of course. There are going to be periods when there's a lot of agony and other periods when there's a boom. And they invent something new that obsoletes your product, you have a problem too. And you solve that by dying. A lot of people don't like that solution, because all those problems are real, and because it's so tempting to get rid of your debt by just giving a guy a non-interest-bearing checking account, where you used to have to pay them interest every month. Not only do we have a serious problem, but the solution to it, that is the easiest, they're the politicians. And for the Federal Reserve too, for that matter, is just to print more money and solve temporary problems. That way, and that of course are going to have some long-term dangers, and we know what happened in Germany. When they were our republic, just kept printing money, the whole thing blew up, and that was a contributor to the rise of Hitler. So all this stuff is dangerous and serious, and we don't want to have a bunch of politicians just doing whatever is easy on the theory that didn't hurt us last time. So we can double it and do it one more time, and then we double it again and so forth. We know what happens on that everlasting doubling, doubling, doubling. You will have a very different government. If you keep doing that enough, you're flirting with danger somewhere unless there's some discipline in the process. But I don't regard Japan as in some terrible danger, having they given only a huge amount of this and gotten by with it. I don't think we'll be as good handling our problems as Japan is in my whole adult life. I've never hoarded cash waiting for better conditions. I've just invested in the best thing I could find, and I don't think I'm going to change now. In the daily journals, used up its cash. Now Berkshire has excess cash, quite a bit of excess cash. But it's not doing that because he thinks it knows how to time investments. He just can't find anything he can stand by, so we don't have a solution to your problem. We're just coping with it. As I've described, the reason we're buying this is we can't buy anything at the prices we're willing to pay, and just that simple. Other people are betting the price up, and a lot of the buying is not by people who really plans to own them. A lot of it is fee ribbon buying. Private equity buys things so they can have more fees by having more things under their management, of course. It's a lot easier to buy something if you use somebody else's money. We're using our own money, at least. That's the way we think of it, the shareholders, who are worried about the future because it looks complicated and difficult, and they're hazard. I want to say to them what my old torch professor said to me. Charlie, you'd say, Charlie, tell me what your problem is, and I'll try and make it more difficult for you. And he did me a favor by treating me that way, and I'm just repeating his favor to you. When you're thinking the thoughts, you're thinking in the right direction. You're worried about the right things. All you people are worried about inflation and the future of the Republicans and so forth. Of course, in a modern democracy in the age of Keynes, you're going to get big government reaction. The reaction this time was bigger than it's never been before in the history of the United States. They just threw money at the problem. But there again, it's an interesting thing. If you take the last 100 years, 1922 to 2022, most of modernity came in that 100 years. And in the previous 100 years, that got another big chunk of modernity. And before that, things are pretty much the same for the previous thousands of years. Life was pretty brutal. One short and limited, and what have you? No printing press, no air conditioning, no modern medicine. No, I don't think we're going to get things that weren't what I call the real human needs. To think of what it meant to get safe. First, you got the steam engine, the steamship, the railroad, and a little bit of improvement in farming, and a little bit of improvement in plumbing. That's what you got. The 100 years it ended in 1922. What do you think of our video? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. Also, subscribe to my channel before you go.